Power Summit was held. And we're going to unpack that. Okay, we're going to talk about this particular summit. I think this is a very critical conversation, considering where the continent is going in terms of the growth of growing a global creative sector, as it were. And there are a lot of Africans that are participating in that. So we're going to talk about that as we begin this particular segment. But let me welcome David, who joins me on the line. David, always a pleasure. Hope you had a wonderful weekend and Father's Day.
Thank you very much. Very nice to join you again today. Good morning. I had a great weekend.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. In fact, yes, as we begin, as I'd mentioned, I'd like us to look at the recently held Africa Soft Power Summit, which was held in Kenya. And it was really about reigniting a critical conversation about the future of the continent's creative economy. And as I understand it, there were very important people in the room, policymakers, business leaders, investors, cultural practitioners, very essential and central to this particular summit. Let's talk about what was challenged in the conversation, what came up in dialogue, especially when we look at the fact that Africa's music and film and fashion and art are growing globally, but there's still a mismatch. There's still a gap that persists when it comes to us fully being able to reap the economic benefits of the sector.
I think what really stood out for me in this entire thing was how the choice of words that were being used here. And we are looking at when someone says something like narrative architecture, then the conversation has shifted. Because initially we were just looking for visibility for African art. But now the visibility is there, and we are looking for payment for it. We wanted to pay now, and we've gotten to a different level. But the difference between a narrative architect and a content creator is worlds apart. The content creator cannot be brought on the table of conversations of the future of the industry, what gets invested in and what does not get invested in, what counts as art and what does not count. That the content creator does not belong there. The narrative architect belongs there. And so I think that was bold, and that signals where we are going. That for years we have been told that culture is our greatest export, but now we can see it. We can see that, for example, Afrobeats is dominating global charts.
Yeah.
African fashion is appearing on international runways. In Nigeria, if you look at their film industry, it is one of the largest film industries in the world. And if you look at our literature, our art, our storytelling, it is increasingly shaping global conversations. I think the question then next is, why does cultural influence not automatically translate into economic power?
Right.
That's where the question is. Yeah.
That's where the question is. And you bring in, it's such an interesting element to the discussion in terms of paying attention to the language that is used. We hardly do that because we want to gloss over certain things and then get straight to, simply looking at this, not, when it comes to creativity and the arts, if you will, not just as a source of identity, but how quickly can we pivot into making it an economic asset. But if we're not shifting our language to support that infrastructure, then there's a mismatch. It's never going to work. And I think that's quite important. So were there any solutions at all then that came from that conversation, considering just the mix of people that were in the room, David?
Yeah. I mean, we are seeing some sort of direction. And the mix of people in the room was deliberate because of what is necessary for us to move forward. So we have seen a situation in which the gaps exist, for example, in distribution. If you want to talk to an African creative today, If you look at issues of copyright enforcement, royalty collection, licensing structures, all these things are owned by organizations that do not belong in the continent. And so, just as we are having a broader conversation, we are not talking about improving the quality of our content anymore. We do not have a creative deficit. The deficit that we have is a value capture deficit. So the people who are broken the rule was deliberate because you need all these people. You need all the policy makers. You need the lawyers. You need negotiators. You need distributors. But also, we need to think about the platforms on which this content runs. And I think in the future, if we're going to have to make a difference, other than talking about language, talking
Mm-hmm.
about bringing all the players together,
Yeah.
we're also going to have to really think about the the, 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 the infrastructure on which this content runs. Because um, perhaps the biggest thing that is going to happen in our creative economy is not another hit song, but the infrastructure on which that hit song is going to be distributed. And I don't think there's a
100%. Yeah.
limit. I don't think we've produced all the platforms that we can ever produce. I think we just need to be bold. And this conference, I think, offered a very good start by bringing all these people together, framing the problem in the right way. And now the commitment needs to follow.
Absolutely. I have to agree with you on that. The discourse is there, the conversations and the dialogue and the right questions are being asked. Now it's time for us to become more pragmatic and really get to the bottom of how Africa can truly benefit from its cultural influence. Very, very important. So this is us having our conversation on our journal notes. Anything you'd like to say, we are streaming audio visually on our Facebook page. If you're watching the show, you can simply comment there. We'd love to see what you have to say wherever you are tuning in from. It's 20 minutes past 10. We take a break and return.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. The Journal with Mateko Musito. Catch it on the Channel Africa app, SABC Plus, and on channelafrica.co.za. Weekdays from 9 till 12 p.m. Central African Time.
Welcome back to the Journal, 21 minutes into 10 a.m. in Central African Time, taking down our journal notes for this Monday, 22 days into the month of June. And here we are once again with David Owino, who joins me as we unpack some of the critical events that have taken place on the African continent. So this conversation, I literally felt my energy shift with this one, because oh my goodness, the conversation on reparations is bringing up all kinds of emotions. If you're an African person, you are going to naturally react, because here we are again with calls for reparations for the transatlantic slave trade, once again being at the center of international debate. This after Africa and the Caribbean leaders renewed demands for a formal apology from European nations that profited from slavery. So, of course, this was at the end of a 3-day conference that happened in West Africa, in Ghana to be exact, which basically this convening was looking at advancing the push for these reparative justices to occur. And here we are again. Here we are again, David. Oh my goodness. Let's talk about this reparations, because it's making me really upset. But at the crux of the issue is, I think, African and Caribbean voices in being able to change global affairs. I mean, do you see a point in the conversation?
Yeah, this is one of those conversations that, as you say, that truly evokes emotion. And I think it's because for a very long time,
Mm.
the humanness in us expects humanness back.
Yeah.
Expect that when we are having such conversations, we do not really we do not need to justify anything. But I think in that assumption is where we lost a lot of things. We lost time. We lost opportunity to rally ourselves together to demand for something important.
Right.
The world is just inherently wicked, and we are going to just have to fight and fight and fight and not lose our heads while at it. The Caribbean has been developing systems, particularly from the legal side. And I think the, 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 the African countries have been much more bolder in wanting to shape global conversations and not simply comment on it. And so, for these two parts of the world to come together, I think that is not only timely, but also important.
Mm.
And what I saw, you know, in Ghana is that the conversation is also shifting a bit.
Yeah.
We have mostly been talking about reparations, where to many of us, what has been in our mind is that there's going to become a time where, for example, the Mau Mau in Kenya, their descendants or their great grandchildren are going to be paid some kind of money, and we settle this story and we forget about it. But what we are seeing here is a recognition that historical injustice created contemporary inequalities. And so, if we are repairing historical justice, the repair must address both the history and its continuing consequences. And that does not begin and end with some money. It takes much more than that. It takes a whole new conversation. Number one, we are creating a new way to engage with the international community. We will not engage the same way. Secondly, we go back into history and say, these created, inequalities. How do we address these inequalities? For example, if there were loans that were taken by colonial administrations, why on earth, explain to me why we still need to pay those loans now? The money was literally being used to oppress us and to
Oh,
create the injustices and the inequalities
yeah.
that we are speaking about. So I think it's a broader recognition that we are not simply speaking about someone who needs to be paid money and boom, we are gone when we finish the story. We are saying it created contemporary inequalities which we are still experiencing today. And I think it also rides on what happened in March when the UN General Assembly recognized transatlantic slavery as the gravest crime against humanity. So it's
Absolutely.
like a follow up on that, yeah.
And I'm thinking, I mean, you're unpacking the fact that this conversation is incredibly layered. I mean, there's the moral argument to it, and then there are the reparations. But there is concern around moving forward, because you mentioned just, I mean, it's absolutely terrible how the world works. I mean, we're firsthand witnessing that, especially when it comes to the diplomatic relations. But when we
Yeah.
move forward, whether we're going to get compensated correctly, morally, and otherwise, how is what is happening going to reshape the diplomatic relations? You allude to that. Obviously, there are going to be changes, but what do we see? Because I think this is really going to shape how the world views, or how African and Caribbean nations are going to interact diplomatically with the West going forward.
Mhm. Um, so I mean, being a journalist, let me start from where my pessimism is, and then where I have hope.
Right. Okay.
I'll finish with where I have hope.
Yes.
Where I have my pessimism is, you see, the UN General Assembly made a resolution that recognized, transatlantic slavery as a gravest crime against humanity. Great. Let's look at some of the countries that voted no in that, voted no to this recognition.
Hmm.
Those were some of the countries with the biggest responsibilities. The countries that voted no were, I think, there was the USA, there was Israel. There must have been another country, but then there were also another about 50 countries that abstained from voting, and that included the UK and the EU countries. You know, that is where the greatest responsibility lie. Now, why this makes me a bit pessimistic is because the UN General Assembly resolutions are not legally binding. The UN Security Council resolutions are legally binding. We know who the permanent members there are. So, so there's a bit of a difference.
Yeah.
What gives me hope, however, is that, well, this recognition exists, and then now we are using it as the frame on which to anchor ongoing conversations on this matter. So what we saw in Ghana, the result of that meeting was a 19-point reparation plan that was endorsed by the countries that were present. And now they are taking this now to the rest of the world to be the structure on which we engage going forward. So it is more structured. It is not South Africa demanding independently, Kenya demanding independently, Ghana demanding independently for reparations. No, it is all these countries in Africa, including the Caribbean, demanding together and having a structured way of making these demands. Then number two, of course, what was proposed at the UN General Assembly was also an organization, a global organization that is specifically tasked with overseeing reparations. So within that, we can have a broader structure of reparations, but also the conversation on restructuring global financial or economic institutions like the
100.
World Bank, IMF, and yes.
Right.
So there's better structure now.
Well, I agree with you. I think that is, I don't know, what we could call a viable alternative, to direct, to of course influence systematic, downfalls, as it were, the financial aid, the massive education and housing subsidies that can come in, the restructuring of international trade and debt is quite a big one, and that could somewhat make a difference. David, this is a big conversation. I think we need to incorporate this into a part two somewhat. But thank you always for your thoughts and your educated opinion. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, David Owino, joining us in his capacity as broadcast journalist from Kenya. 10:31, Figilele Ngwati standing by with the latest sports.
Sports on